Welcome to the Millennial Sandwich, a space for real conversations about millennials in the middle, not just of our own lives, but also of a caregiving sandwich. I'm Dr. Anita Zara, a geriatrician and expert in elder care.
And I'm Zara Hannawalt, a parenting journalist and expert in American motherhood. And even we don't have all the answers. Join us as we figure out life in the middle. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We are here today with Elissa Strauss. She's a journalist. She is an author. She literally wrote the book about caregiving. And I think it is so important that we tell stories about care in thoughtful ways. And she is someone who is absolutely doing that every day. So welcome. We are so happy to have you. Can you tell everyone a little bit more about yourself and your work?
Sure. So I've been writing about kind of the intersection of feminism, motherhood, now caregiving as well as motherhood and parenting, and culture, with some policy thrown in for good measure for a long time now. I think I've been saying 15 years for too long. I think we could bump it up to 18 years now. And really interested in, I think, the narrative change piece when it comes to parenting and caregiving. I think I spent a long time writing policy pieces where it was like, how can we not have paid leave? How can we, everything that we all just hit our heads up against the wall again every day reckoning with. And at some point I felt like, okay, I want to dig deeper and really kind of pull out our care crisis by its roots. So that's where a lot of my work is focused on now.
Which I love because there's such interdependence, right, between the policy and the culture and the actual experience of caring for other people. What drove your interest in this line of work?
Yeah, so it really started with having a kid, as these things tend to go, right? And I think I went into parenthood. I wasn't ambivalent about wanting kids. I'm one of 4 kids in my family. I felt like kind of the nuclear family unit, something that worked for me is in my childhood a lot. It felt like a really good place of warmth and connection and belonging and arguments and all the tensions too and just functionality. And so I kind of knew I wanted that in my life, but I was very ambivalent about getting like sucked into motherhood as kind of an identity trap. All the tensions that still feel very real for new moms today, but do fade away. I can say as a mom of a 9 and a 13-year-old, motherhood no longer really feels threatening to my identity in any meaningful way. But when I started as a mom, it for sure did. So I went into it kind of wanting to keep motherhood as a distance in terms of my identity and how I existed in the world at large. And like on the side, I would just care for this kid named Aki. It was like something I would keep as a side dish and like a little hobby I did. And then the experience of it did not allow for such like separation of selves, and also made me really wonder like why we needed to feel like we have to keep our motherhood or care self separate from all our other selves, which pulled me into questioning a lot of the feminism that I was raised on, which is like kind of a shorthand of like Sex and the City feminism or girl boss, lean in feminism, and feeling very yes and about everything. It's like I have a career, right? We're still stuck in this. Like I am definitely not a tradwife and I'm definitely not a girl boss, whatever those mean. And I really want economic independence and stability, but I also find care really meaningful. And so trying to create a feminism that actually lifts up care and doesn't just replicate the very masculine way of degrading care. So I'm still there, and now as a sandwich caregiver in addition to just a parent. So there's a whole new dimension to this work that I've like just started.
We just posted something on our social media about how I think so many millennial women fell into this girl boss tradwife trap. And I think it's very seductive because it almost gives you permission to do less on the surface, because it's like you don't have to have it all. You can choose one lane or the other, but then you get there and you're like, one side of the equation tells me that care work is not meaningful and it's not valuable and it can't add to my sense of fulfillment. And the other side is like, it's not work. It just happens. Your countertops are clean, Yeah. So I think that it's this very strange narrative that we're trying to navigate. And like you said, I think many of us felt this pressure to separate our identities into professional and personal and maternal. And it just doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way. And really both flatten and diminish care, right? Either you're doing it by glorifying it and sentimentalizing it or overly sentimentalizing it, or you're making it something like what I thought, like it should be kept between the cracks, but real interesting life happens outside of it. And it's like neither apply to the lives of the vast majority of women in the United States and probably the world,
And when we talk about care too and caregiving, we often talk about it in the context of a leave or taking a break from what we're actually doing. It makes it seem like it's just not happening all the time. Even the word caregiving, when you say that your work is about caregiving and care, do people kind of assume that you're talking about caring for someone who's sick or old and not just the everyday care work that we're all doing?
So actually, the first assumption most people have when they say, what are you writing a book about? And I say care. Often they mishear me and think I said hair, which I love. Like happens a lot. And I don't think it's that I pronounce the word so poorly that I really sounds like hair. But I think it's like people like care just didn't register in their brain as a subject that you'd write a book as. So they like went to the next thing that they thought might have sounded like that word. I'd be like, no, care. And then once we got over the hair piece, then people just immediately assumed it was what I call kumbaya care, which is like volunteering at a soup kitchen or helping your neighbor. That's the first place people went to, like collective care, which is beautiful. I'm not trying to degrade it. We need more of that in the world. Mutual aid societies, making a pot of soup for someone who's sick, that kind of care that is really lovely and fundamentally different than what I actually write about, which is what I call dependency care, ongoing dependency care, which I joke, I call it the Hotel California of care. Like you can check in, but you can't really check out. You could you can stop caring for a parent with dementia. You can stop caring for your kids, but you're kind of a little bit stuck, right? That was like the last place anyone went when they thought, oh, what this book is about.
It's so funny that you say that. I feel like motherhood very much felt like that. Like you check in one day and not always by choice, but often by choice. When you're caring for your aging parents, I find you often don't have that check-in moment. And all of a sudden you're like, I'm in the hotel.
Yeah.
How did I get here?
For sure. No, for sure. I don't think you always voluntarily check in. Yeah. The emphasis is on you can never leave part of the song.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot, about how so many people find themselves in the sandwich generation without ever really realizing they had entered it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think care sneaks up on us.
The way we think about care too is just societally, we think of hands-on care, helping with day-to-day things, personal care, those kinds of things. But we are actually starting to care so much sooner. What are your thoughts on what we're missing about care? Because we talk a lot about anticipatory care in the way that we're always thinking in the background, making sure things are taken care of for both parents and kids or whoever our people are. There's a lot more to it than we talk about.
Yeah. I think one big thing we miss with care, the conversation around care is the body and the embodied part of it. And that whether it's parenting or caring for your kids, we're thinking about bodies a lot, not just in terms of doctor's appointments, but how to relate to bodies, how to nourish bodies, how to keep bodies happy. I think it's because our culture is such that we're so quickly to think in terms of work and productivity that it's like you think of caregiving, you think of the doctor's appointments and the hold lines and the, scheduling this and making sure that, and that is a lot of it. There's no question the worry work. But I think, one big thing is we're dealing with a human being with a body with feelings, and tending to a body with feelings is just ongoing in nature. It's like jazz. You can't really write the score. You could plan all you want, but at the end of the day, it's by nature an improv activity. Every time I talk to a parent that has dementia, I am improving. Like that's what it is. So I think that kind of improv embodied emotional side of it is something that isn't really acknowledged as much.
Has that been hard for you, as I imagine someone who probably likes to be in control, like many high achieving women, someone who likes to have a plan and who likes to know how things are going to go? Has that improv piece of it thrown you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think parenting helped untrain me from being like an overfunctioner on some level and learning to let go. So I think that was a good on-ramp, even though it's a whole other level when you deal with a parent, particularly a parent with experiencing any kind of cognitive decline. Every day, it's like a new thing of like try, but maybe fail is almost the motto, right? To not get stuck between, as I mentioned, I'm one of 4 siblings. We're all pretty involved and everyone's at different sides of the spectrum of like from like, don't do it because it's probably not going to work or fail. This like whatever intervention of the day we're trying, or the other is like, we have to keep trying, like muscle mass and memory and that, and it's like trying to find the way. It's like you try, but you can fail. And I think the other thing that has kind of, I don't know, my husband, he's like, you've gotten really good at lying. And I was like, I don't see it that way. I feel like I am an improv storyteller. I really do enjoy telling stories to my children, and whatever it is, I have the thing coded in me that makes me like be able to lay on the pillow and just tell a long made up story to my kids. And that's a surprising skill that I can now bring to dealing with this parent, because I can try to bridge reality and their vision of reality with what I see as actual reality with a little like narrative embellishment. And, my husband's like, you're just lying all the time. I was like, you could put it that way. I was like, but I think I'm trying to weave a story that knits together the realities. And that is where it's like, I'm a writer. I think in terms of language and narrative. So that's an example I think of like where I found a way to improv using like a skill set that I have that actually is meaningful to me, but it works.
Yeah, it's amazing how the skills you gain professionally feed into the skills you gain as a caregiver and vice versa. I don't think people talk enough about how much overlap there truly is between all of these skills and how they enrich each other. And I think there's this narrative that caregiving demands complete self-sacrifice, but your work really focuses on how care can enrich your life. What made you come up with that?
Yeah. So everything you just said is like everything I think about all the time, right? I think for starters, I don't think you can care well for a person if it's really self-sacrifice. There's of course sacrifice is part of it, but if like you lose your entire self to caregiving, you're not actually able to really be receptive and in tune to another self if you don't have a self. That's why I hate these metaphors we still use of like, if your tank is empty, you need to refuel. Or if like the oxygen mask, right? Like put on yours before others. I was on the plane the other day and I heard this flight attendant tell a parent that it's not a casual suggestion. You actually have like 20 seconds before you're passed out where you're totally unresponsive. It's not, or even a shorter amount of time, maybe 10 seconds. And it's like, this is the metaphor that we all use. Like, we have to be
Yeah.
10 seconds away from being a non-responsive human. That's the line of self-care that we've drawn. And so I really believe, and this is where I really nerd out, and I've gotten really into care philosophy in the last few years, that care is different than altruism. That part of the reason we think it's the same is because we've bundled care giving with what I called kumbaya care early. Like we kind of think it's the same mechanism in us that makes us want to like help a neighbor clean up right their lawn as it is to like do ongoing dependency care with a child or parent. It's like really a whole different system. It's a whole different way of being. So I really think it's not altruism. It's not self-sacrifice. And you really can't care well unless you're showing up with a whole self that's reasonably intact. And I'm not saying our society makes it easy to keep that self intact, anything but I don't think any ideal of care that's revolves around self-sacrifice is good for anyone. And then once we kind of get past that, to hit the second point in the question, there's really a lot we can learn about ourselves through parenting and caregiving, through trying to receive another person can become, for me, it became like the best mirror to self I've ever experienced, and the best way to like understand really who I am and what I want from life in my attempt to understand who they are and what they want from life.
I can imagine some listeners who might be thinking, I'm a caregiver and I don't feel enriched. I don't feel transformed. I'm exhausted. How do you reconcile both of those things to exist?
Yeah, I do think, again, we live in a country that makes it very hard to maintain a sense of who you are as a caregiver. And I think we all need to push back on a lot of the narratives of growth and enrichment that basically all revolve around men being off alone in the woods or something, or taking ayahuasca, right? Like Henry David Thoreau, living in a cabin, or even some of like Eat, Pray, Love or Wild. Like so many are narratives of self-actualization have us view dependency as claustrophobic, and it's all about being independent and getting out there. And so I do think holding a little part inside of you that's like, this is the big movie. Like, this is the Steven Spielberg movie. This is the big story. I am doing something meaty and meaningful. This is a hero's journey. It actually creates space. And it doesn't mean it's not hard, but every Steven Spielberg and George Clooney movie about war features people doing really hard stuff the whole time, but we all sit with awe because they're like, wow, they're getting so wise through this really hard thing. But we just have like no cultural templates for thinking of care in those terms as hard and meaningful. It's either supposed to be easy and therefore meaningful. And if it's hard, somehow we interpret that as you're doing something wrong. It's not always easy, but to the degree that you can kind of change your perspective and see this as like, wow, this is hard, but this is the real work of life. This is some real shit. I am in it and this is meaningful and I am learning things and I am becoming wiser and I will return to the world like the hero returns from the hero's journey, wiser with things to share to others. It does help you navigate the experience. The problem is we just need to also build a culture where those parents and caregivers are treated like they experience something big and important and fleshy and wild and meaningful and not drains on the system, which is generally how our culture.
Yeah, and I think there's this one conversation that nobody's really ready to have. When I say nobody, I don't mean nobody in this chat. I mean many people in the outside world about how the minimization of care work is actually really patriarchal. And it is really, really rooted in sexism. And I think that is at the root of why stay-at-home mothers aren't given any cultural or systemic value. I think that's why care work obviously has economic value. It just hasn't received that economic value. And I know that your book touches on that as well. What have you really learned about the economics of care?
Yeah. So I think for starters, and this figure might have changed a little bit since I last researched it, but it gives you a general sense of how big a part of the economy care is. That if you added up all the unpaid parenting and caregiving and you paid everyone minimum wage for those hours, it would be worth as much as the entire retail sector. Just everything we all buy at Amazon and Walmart and the Gap and whatever. Like it's like all the shopping care is actually worth a little more than all that. So it just gives you a sense of like, this is a huge part of our economy. And the reason we don't see it as such is because it's not counted as part of the GDP. And, one fascinating thing I learned in researching my book was that since the very beginning of the GDP, people were wrestling with like, how do you measure and count household production, like domestic work and care work. And there was even this woman named Phyllis Dean, an economist, a Scottish economist, who went on one of the first kind of fact-finding trips to Africa, where they started digging into how they were going to do this crazy thing and, figure out a national account or figure out what a country's economic worth is. And even on that trip, this is, 100 years ago, basically, and she's watching the woman walk a mile back and forth and carrying water, back to their homes. And she's like, well, we're not counting that. And we're still not, basically. Like, we're still not counting that. And it really reflects in our policies. It's like Nancy Fulbray, who's this great economist who's worked on care forever, was like, you can't fight for what you can't measure, basically. If we don't have a sense of how much care is worth, then we can't make a really good argument of why we need to invest in parents and caregivers, why we need to have, affordable childcare, why we need to have respite care be free, all these things. You can start making an economic case when you understand the economic implications of that time. I think another really fascinating thing that illustrates this point is some say the GDP and productivity went up when women started really leaving the home and working in the kind of second wave feminism era. But others say if you actually had factored in household production, the productivity of society actually went down. So it's all these blind spots. You breastfeed, breast milk's not part of the GDP, formula's part of the GDP. There's so many blind spots in how we economically measure care. And it just impacts all of us every single day, because this work, we internalize all these narratives. They can feel so far away. What does the GDP have to do with my burnout? It actually has everything to do with your burnout, because you live in a society that puts no worth, cultural, narrative, financial, any worth on your care. And so you feel like you're doing something wrong. I know when I became a parent, I was like so nervous about somehow contributing to the gender gap in income. Like that really was something I thought about a lot. And I do. I couldn't figure out how to not to. Our life didn't work that way. But then I did, like back of the envelope calculations one day and saw that if I was compensated for care, even at a really low rate, actually that kind of erased the gender gap in my home. And I don't know, just like imagine if we all really internalize that and felt valued in that way. It makes a big difference.
And I think so many people don't have partners who make them feel valued and respected in that way, who don't see the work that they're doing. What is your advice for people in situations like that?
Yeah, you're right. It's such a good illustration of how care was left out of all these big systems, and it's all that we've all internalized that in our houses with our partners, and it really hurts. My favorite tip, really, and a very practical, is just like leave. Not for good, but leave. Just leave and leave and leave another time and leave another time. Often this is the male partner, so we'll just we know this isn't always true, but because it's often enough the case, we're going to say that this partner that doesn't always appreciate care is the dad here, and just like leave the dad to deal with stuff. We have to be careful. There is something called maternal gatekeeping because we're so worried about being judged for not doing care-centered activities correctly, whether it's like planning a birthday party a certain way or having the kids show up at school on picture day dressed a certain way. We feel like we will be judged as moms, and that's because we will. That we often can meddle sometimes when we leave it to dad, but I think it's very liberating to leave it to dad. Dad's going to learn a lot when he does it. And you're going to learn also how to let go a little bit. Because I think, I think it's mostly on dads to step up, but it's also a lot of moms also need to learn how to step back and let go. And then and then with that, once you leave, you find what are your individual strengths and how to bring them together more.
Some moms will say, I would do that, but I don't want my kid to suffer. So they keep doing the care work anyway because they feel the guilt of the kid suffering if it's not done well or at all.
Right. Sometimes that's the case, and that's really hard, but often the kid will be fine. And then really what you need to get to is for the partner to suffer the consequences of the kid not getting what they need and to understand what that's like. That's the full circle here. It's not like the kid is probably, if this is the problem, right, in the household, the kid is probably already living, like having a mom that's that on it, that the kid's probably already living a stable and nourishing enough existence to survive a few hiccups with the dad. So I think that's the big thing. Do dads experience the consequences of not showing up in the way that kids need? Because if we're letting them do stuff, but then we protect them from the consequences or we swoop in at the last moment because we're worried about the kid, it's not really at the end of the day breaking the cycle.
Yeah.
And the dad will know that. Because why would they give it 100% if mom's going to swoop in? Yeah.
Yeah, and so much of it is just mapped in those earliest days, right? If you are breastfeeding, if your child calms easiest when you're holding them because they recognize your body and your smell and your maternal gait and all of these things. And it can be hard to deprogram some of that, I think.
Right.
I think that's a very real piece of it. I think that's also why we need paternity leave, but topic for another time.
That's also, you may not fix it in your home, but if you want to pay it forward, advocate for universal paid leave. And then also build a culture where it's normalized for dads to take it because they don't always go together. My husband didn't have leave with our first one, but did have leave with our second one. And it was just a night and day difference for me. It felt so much lighter, so much easier because newborns are simple but difficult, right? It's not hard. It's just never ending. It's like just having someone else to pass the baby to, even if it's only 30% of the time, which was not the case with us, but even if it's it just makes all the difference just to eat and shower, especially as a first time. And then the other thing that I think really made the difference for us, but I would hardly recommend this as a universal recommendation, is that I did not produce a lot of breast milk, did my best, but our kids are mostly formula fed. And that really changes the game so much when dads can do midnight feedings. Again, this is not something I'm saying, and therefore everyone should formula feed. It's not hardly a universal recommendation. But it really kind of fundamentally changes the dynamic from the beginning. And I think how you said, like all babies speak a secret language. And if your husband doesn't really have a chance to learn the baby speak secret language, it's really hard if you spent the whole day with the baby, your husband spent the whole day at work, there's like 3 crazy hours in the evening. It's not really a great window for your husband to learn the baby secret language, right? It's hard. And I understand and I sympathize with both sides. You're running on, fumes at that point. But if you can share it by way of feeding, it develops. Yeah, it made the difference for me. My husband too. He's a writer too. He wrote an op-ed for the New York Times of how formula feeding is great for dads. And he really appreciated it because it allowed him to have those early years bonding with the kids.
Yeah. The culture part is so important in all types of care work. And I know you talk a lot about our obsession with independence. In my work with geriatrics, I see this so much because part of our assessment or part of our geriatric assessment is asking there's an age-friendly framework that includes the 4 M's. One of those is what matters most. Almost always for older adults, they'll say to keep being independent, to keep being independent. And I've been thinking about this so often because what does that really mean? They're really just saying, I want to keep doing the things that I enjoy. In other countries, so my only reference really is that I'm a practicing physician here in the United States and my family's from India. And I have spent a lot of time with older adults in India. But the older adults in India are still doing all the things they want to enjoy. And they're not talking about independence the same way because they're supported by their community, their children, their siblings in a way that they can still keep doing. They're not noticing that they're not able to, go play cards with their friends or go pray with their people because they're still doing that. The structure is set up in their society that they will still be able to do those things. But here we talk about independence. It's not I don't think when people say independence here, it is the true meaning of independence. It's not like people really want to do things on their own. It's that they want to continue getting joy from things that they have always received joy from. Separating those things is really hard, especially
That's so fascinating.
with
Yeah,
driving, for example. Like we say in our geriatric recommendations, we're like, keep doing the things, keep your social circles, keep, going to church, keep doing, but also we're not going to provide you any way to do any of these things. And we're not going to make it easy for you to do that. But do that though, because that's how you're going to age well. And don't drive because that's dangerous. But can you also go do your own groceries and do your own meal? It feels wrong giving these recommendations when I know this person has no way to get there and we're not helping. The healthcare system isn't helping. The government isn't helping. So it's like you're just screaming into the wind these recommendations that would work. But sorry, society doesn't actually let us help you do that.
Right. But maybe you're like 1 in 10,000 people who actually has like the social conditions to do them. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also the cultural narratives about care are so different in India too, and in many other parts of the world. I don't think they view spending time with people as a waste of time the way we do in the United States. I think we have a real issue just doing. Anita, I think you sent me that article about how doing nothing with the people you love is really good for you.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like in this country, people can't wrap their heads around that.
Because it's all about
they really
productivity.
Yeah.
Right. And then, so it's like we had the gall, like we built this culture, it's all about productivity. And then we had the gall to consider somehow slot care as not being productive, so it's like a double whammy, right? It's like it is by our measures of productivity, care is productive, and particularly by our value systems in our culture. If we believe in making sure people live lives of dignity and connection, and it's very productive, right? But yet somehow we've internalized this idea that care is not productive, and 100% it contributes to the burnout caregivers feel because you feel like you're being left out of the race. Whatever this race is getting to, or whatever this race is like heading towards, whatever, if you even really want the prize, is almost not important. It's just like you're left out of the race. You're suddenly left out. And then a burnt out caregiver is not a great caregiver for the recipient of the care. And then it's just like the cycle continues,
I saw a post today from a stay-at-home mom saying that every time she takes her kids to the park and someone asks her what she does, they look at her like she's just a lost cause. And so she started telling people she's the nanny. and the way they treat her is completely different. Yeah.
It's so depressing. I mean, it's like sometimes you stop and think and you hear something like that. And you're like, we have not evolved to the point at this point in the human story to understand that that's a reasonable and valuable way to spend time. Knowing what we know too about early childhood development, right? That's the other crazy thing. We've had a total explosion of knowledge in the last, let's say, 40, maybe 60 years of the importance of the early years. It's really well documented now. It's not negotiable. So we know that. And yet we've somehow only moved in a direction that continues to diminish the work of caring for children in their early years, whether it's like, right, preschool teachers or parents doing it. And it's just kind of mind boggling. Like we separated the child from the parent and we seem to care about children doing well, but we have no interest in making sure the parent who is responsible for the child is also doing.
Do you think some of the resentment towards caregiving is because it exposes our own vulnerability?
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, I think it can feel cliche to keep saying we live in this productivity, optimization obsessed, culture that like the pursuit of independence written in the Declaration of Independence, in our basically foundational documents. Feels cliche to go back to that, but right, like all of that makes us able to pretend that we're invincible. And we're so comfortable doing that. And anytime we have to deal with oopy goopy bodies and vulnerability and dependency, it just like reminds us that we're weak and fragile and die. And we hate that in this culture. We really hate it.
I know that you posted a few months ago about a caregiving secret, and I think so many of us have. I have one too. So many people have maybe not a secret, but something that they just don't know how to talk about publicly. One, because there are so many stigmas about so many things, and two, because I think sometimes we feel like it's not our story to tell, and we are concerned with protecting our loved ones and their dignity and their agency. Do you have any thoughts on the prevalence of the caregiving secret and how we tell stories about caregiving while keeping certain things to ourselves?
Yeah. I mean, I think it really ties back to what we were just talking about. And there's so much shame more than ever about growing older in this country. And now, it used to be like the wealthiest guys would have big bellies and look their age. And, maybe they'd have a wife that was a third of their age and that would be the trophy. But now they themselves have to magically look like they're 20 alongside their wife who maybe is actually 20, right? And like more than ever, we just do everything we can to deny the reality that humans are mortal beings. And this all factors into so much shame surrounding any condition that recognizes that you are aging and growing and you're, increasingly dependent on others and vulnerable. And, I really create a line between caregiver burnout and ageism and our obsession with youth because it's like if you're caring for an adult parent who has a condition, but they're ashamed of it, you can't talk about it, or they're resisting it themselves, which happens a lot. I know many experience this myself. I know many experience the same thing where the parents just total denier and totally resistant to getting any attention or help. So it's not resistant to actually being cared for. It's like you show up, you're like, hi, can I care for you? And it's like, no, because if you care for me, that means I'm dependent, I'm old, right? And I just see this going in totally the wrong direction. And then once that becomes a source of shame for the person you're caring for, you can't actually care for them because they resist everything. And you can't talk about it because that's where the secret part comes, right? It's this huge part of your story, but because they don't want to recognize it, then you're not allowed to recognize it either. And it just makes for the poorest conditions to actually get the support you, the caregiver, need and the person receiving the care needs. It's just a nightmare. And I feel like, boy, are we headed in the wrong direction as fast as we can.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's a really complicated issue in the digital age, especially because there are so many people who have built their entire brands off of somebody else's health, someone else's health status, or the condition that they are dealing with. I see this a lot with mothers,
Yeah.
becoming kind of influencers for the condition that their child has. And I think it's a really murky ethical area because,
That's interesting. Yeah.
and I don't know. And I think that, we need to be telling these stories about what it looks like to care for people And at the same time, I don't know if we really should have that at our fingertips, that ability to put somebody else's story out there without their consent.
Yeah. I mean, right. It feels like flip sides of the two coins almost, right? If you can create this tidy narrative of it, then you could profit off of it somehow, or you make it a brand identity. And if you can't, if it like stays in the kind of the messiness of the human experience, and then it has to stay a secret.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how do we talk about these stories? How do we kind of liberate caregivers from secrets that may be burdensome for them, but still respect the fact that there's someone else's story at hand here? And
Yeah.
yeah,
And children can't consent, and some older adults can't consent either. So
right.
it's
It
just
is
very
really
complicated.
tricky. I think, I've tried to find a middle ground of writing about my experience as the caregiver or the parent and not projecting on them any feelings or even explaining circumstances that are specific to like their lives. It's just about what my relationship is like with them. And I think that's how I try to split the difference, but it's hardly easy or perfect. And, I've hardly figured it out. And it's definitely just kind of an internal tension of writing about parenting or caregiving is that you can't write about it without telling a little bit of someone else's story because we're writing about relationships and it deserves to be written about. I mean, it would be a really impoverished world if no one wrote about these kind of relationships, but you are writing about someone else's life in addition to your own.
That voice is, like you said, so important for people, even in the way we talk about medicine and aging and people getting old. It's so focused on the person getting old, and we really don't have that many voices, caregiver voices, who are sharing the experience. We just need it.
Right. And if we could just get over the fact that this is tragic or somehow not what was supposed to happen and accept that this is often what happens, I mean, certainly the dying part, but the illness and the dementia part, we would just get a little closer to being able to have these conversations in more honest and less fraught ways, and then maybe get less tempted by feeling like you have to build a brand identity around it. So
Yeah, it's kind of like potty training. When people talk about potty training online and they offer their tips, I'm okay with that. I don't think it's okay that you talk about the accident your kid had or
yeah.
you show a picture.
Yeah.
It's just, it has to be handled with sensitivity.
I really kind of I'm like a dinosaur. This is where my old millennial vibes are coming out, but I really kind of missed Instagram as a first time parent. Like it wasn't hopping when I had Augie. And I do think it's like a fundamentally different mindset
Totally.
that it's created for like a whole generation of parents. And I just squeaked by, like literally, it was like the curtain was about to open, but I had them right before it. Then I missed the show, and that was it, And so, yeah, I think I was very much like, for me, the formative influences was the feminist blogosphere, which made me feel like motherhood's not cool, basically, for the
Yeah.
most part, which is something I've wrestled with since. But it wasn't, but it wasn't certainly visual, which is a huge difference. And it also wasn't this weird, dizzying polarization of like, motherhood's the worst, and here's the messiness, and the kids are, or like motherhood's the best, and here's my homemade yogurt.
Yeah.
It was a different beast. Yeah.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
actually think about that a lot with our generation and being, chronically online, and how we're kind of obsessed with the fact that we look young, act young, and not aging, but we absolutely are aging. And I'm a little worried about when our generation is geriatric, which is far away, but not that far away. And I feel like people are going to be blindsided because we've kind of tricked our own brains into thinking that we're not aging. Even like I see people who are 65 and older, 65 to 70, if I say I'm the geriatrician, they act like I just punched them in the face. It's so offensive to them. And I'm like, this is just my job. I'm not saying anything negative about you. It's just a fact that you are older than 65, and I am trained to treat people who are older than 65. I'm not insulting you, but that's how it feels. That's how it
Right.
seems.
And then you try to care for that person. It's just so much. But I think, what's the AARP, like qualifying age? I think it's shockingly young.
I think it's
Isn't it
now,
50?
yeah, something absurd.
It's like
That
50.
does.
Yeah. And it's created everything about it is for like an entirely different generation.
Yeah.
When you might retire at 55 or 60, these things that are just so not possible for anyone anymore. Right.
Yeah.
But so it's like, you could imagine yourself in a room with retired people, maybe even at 54, knowing that even if you had 6 more years in the workforce, but imagine today, the average 50-year-old would never see themselves as belonging to any group that pointed north age-wise.
Right.
It's like you would be like, no, I'm 30 basic. Like that's where you associate yourself now. It's like, no, I'm more like the 30-year-olds, aren't I? And then you think of like sandwich caregivers stuck in between that. It's like you're incubating children, you're cultivating the youth in your home. You're tending to someone older, often declining in some ways. And then you're also supposed to somehow stay magically young, deny the fact that you're aging in that process. It's such a mind fuck. It's like, no wonder everyone's losing their minds. And that's where like care is taking away from the most important thing, which is staying young, because you don't really stay young that well when you care. It's hard to do all the things, that you're supposed to do these days to stay young when you have care responsibilities, and then the care responsibilities aren't valued. So you just feel like crap.
And we're doing it all at the same time now, which is new for our generation. We're not, generations before us had a break of some sort. Like you do childcare, and then you maybe get to focus on yourself for a little bit before you are caring for parents, where all of our caring years are just happening at the same time.
Right. It's like years ago at San Diego on 4th of July. I don't know if you guys ever saw this, but there's this fireworks show where by accident, like 30 or 40 minutes of fireworks all went off at once. That's what I think about when I think about sandwich caregiving. It was like, it's a hilarious clip. You can watch it online, but it was like something got messed up in the computer, and it was just like,
that is what it feels like. Like something is wrong.
And it was 90 seconds of 90 minutes of fireworks. Yeah, something like that. That's what it's like. Yeah.
Totally. And careers going off at the same time, and marriage, and then everyone's telling you need to eat more protein. It's just everything.
I know. Yeah. And like, remember, it was great to do Pilates, and now my sister's like, Pilates is nothing. You're not weight training. You're to lift at least 80 pounds. Like, why? Like a year ago, you told me to do Pilates. I don't know. Leave me alone. I thought it was fine. I was like, it's like I do the thing, and then it's not enough. Like, no, HIIT workouts. No, like nothing counts. Right now, the only thing that counts is weightlifting. And I was like, all right, well, I can't keep adapting.
That's what it's like to be a millennial, right? Once it's cool, like once you're like, yeah, this is cool, it's probably not cool anymore. It's probably not the right thing.
And it will kill you because we're also obsessed with not aging and being healthy as can be, right? It's like suddenly that'll actually be bad for you. Something like, what? Yeah.
You're supposed to be wearing capris again, apparently.
I won't be doing that.
No, I don't think so.
You know what I did, you guys? I didn't go back to a skinny jean, but I went back to a straight leg. I got exhausted. I like a straight leg too. I tried. I have some barrels and some baggies, but I was like, you know what? I miss my straight legs. So
I draw the line at low rise. I'll do a straight leg. Never low rise. Yeah. No, it's just not happening. I don't even know how I did it then.
Yeah. Wear the jeans we want, It's like it's the least we can do for ourselves, Yeah.
All right. There are a couple rapid fire questions I would love to ask you, if that's okay. What is a caregiving myth you wish would disappear?
I already said it, but I'm going to say it again, that care is the same as altruism. And to care well for another person means just endlessly giving of yourself. You cannot care well without a self.
And what's one way you've learned to receive care instead of only giving it?
I think right now the way that's most alive for me is collaborating with my siblings when caring for a parent, and like trying to listen and receive what their strengths might be in this scenario, instead of being the over-functioning oldest daughter that I'm very inclined to be.
All right. Finish this sentence. A meaningful life isn't one where
you don't get to learn about yourself through relationships with others. I'm a big believer in that. And we really co-actualize, and we don't just self-actualize. So relational formation.
And then this isn't rapid fire, but we ask every guest, what would be your millennial sandwich survival tip for anybody in this season of life?
Sense of humor. I feel like humor, being able to laugh at things, is really sometimes the only tool I have in my pocket, and it works. Just the absurdity of work-life balance, the kind of constant Wild West improv nature of dementia care. I think, always careful not to laugh at the people. Of course, it's not that, but just to kind of laugh at the shakiness of the ground. It goes a long way.
Parenting too. It's like if you don't laugh,
Yeah.
you will go crazy.
Yes. I mean, I think it's kind of like, man plans, God laughs. It's like, let's laugh with God. I think that's the crux of it, right? Like we do our best in this life, but so few things turn out exactly how you want them to. And that's even when you have a lot of control, like a work project or something, right? When the thing that you're worried about is a whole other human being, they're really probably not going to turn out. Things aren't going to turn out, exactly how you want them to. So you do your best, and then you got to sit back and just kind of laugh at the absurdity of it all.
Yeah, I don't know if you feel the same way, but I really think that working as a journalist actually prepared me for motherhood in that way because you are constantly just like you don't never know what you're walking into in this field.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's really true. And I think the improv thing is so necessary, for particularly journalism, when you're writing on pretty quick deadlines and you really can't chase perfection as a
Yeah.
journalist. Like it's just not the nature of the craft, right? So I think you show up. I mean, you show up, it's not that you don't show up and then you witness a little.
Yeah, you show up, you do 4 people's jobs, and then you might get laid off.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But yeah, I think listening, showing up, listening, learning, receiving, doing your best. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
guys. This was a
you.
lot of fun.
This was fun.
I appreciate having this opportunity to chat with you.
Thank you for listening to the Millennial Sandwich. Don't forget to like, subscribe, give us a rating, and connect with us on social media.